Thank you. So what we're going to talk about today, this is cybersecurity for startups, and what you need to know and kind of what you should do to ensure your success from early on. My name's Chris Rothy. I work at a startup here in Denver called Red Canary. We do endpoint threat detection and response. And so I have a jacket up there. Ramon's got a jacket here, so I'll let Ramon, but you don't have a jacket up there. You must, yeah, look, no jacket.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't coordinate this. Anyway, Ramon's going to introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm Ramon Papo. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Protectwise. Protectwise is a Denver headquartered startup. We're about 100 people. We were founded in April of 2013, and we are headquartered at 16th and Milano, so a little bit down the road. We have fun making our way over here past the ballpark traffic and whatnot. So really appreciate you guys coming out, and I'd love to just get a sense of people in the room. How many of the people here are security practitioners? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. So we're excited for a really good conversation here. I'm assuming that the people that are not security practitioners, you're somewhere in the startup creation process, developers, entrepreneurs, etc.
We'll just go one by one.
Your function, please.
All right, so this is going to be kind of the agenda that we're going to go through. So we're going to talk about why you should care about this as a startup, what cybersecurity is, and some of what it isn't. We'll talk about why, a little bit of the why behind why cyber attacks exist, who's behind it, how they do it, and then where to start kind of protecting yourself and your company. To kind of jump into why you should care, if you'll indulge me with a little bit of a narrative here, we kind of face this existential crisis, and the security practitioners in here hopefully would attest to this, where when I was born back in 1982, the cost of a gigabyte of storage was $250,000, right? And today that cost is somewhere around 3 cents, which is awesome, right? We can store everything. We can put everything on disk. We can store it on our premises. We can store it in the cloud. In order to kind of deal with that, we had to build these crazy fast networks, right? So we have ARPANET, which came around in 1984, kind of the precursor to the internet. About 50 kilobits per second was the bandwidth of that network. Depending on your source, the total bandwidth in the internet these days is somewhere around 10, 12, or more terabytes per second, right? So crazy fast networks, lots of places to go, lots of places to move data. If you think about what that's meant for companies along that time frame, is you're now storing all this data because it brings you value as a company, right? It adds to your top line value. And unfortunately, that means that it's also valuable to bad guys, right? And so as the amount of data has increased kind of exponentially, so too has the quantity and the number of people who are out to get it and take it for their purposes. Unfortunately, what hasn't increased at the same rate is the number of security practitioners in the world, right? There's kind of this gap that has been widening over time. So we have something like 500 to 600,000 open job recs for security personnel in the U.S. right now, and that's expected to go up to 2020 in 2020 to be about 1 million or more. Empty recs, jobs that are out there that can't be filled. So what I'm saying is, now that you're at this talk, you've all been drafted into security. We meet all of you.
Welcome to the Army.
Welcome, yeah. And so that's really what we're up against, and that's why this is such a challenge for big businesses, big and small. And there's a lot of things you can do at kind of a micro level that make that need less, and we'll talk about some of that. But that's really what we're up against, is the attackers right now. And I kind of think of it as like our defenders, we call them blue team guys, right? Our blue team guys are kind of like Spartans right now, right? And they're 10-on-1 battle, trying to keep attackers out of our networks. And unfortunately, the Spartans ultimately lost, and so our defenders ultimately lose too. And that's really why we exist. The great thing about Colorado and the security community here is every security company here in Colorado is really focused on that problem in different ways. Protectwise, their product is really meant to make the people who are doing security operations, those gladiators, the Spartans, make them that much more effective, right? And really level them up, make them be able to take on 100 at a time instead of 10 at a time. Our company is focused on buying down or reducing the number of people that a company needs internally by providing some of it in an outsourced fashion, kind of in a tech-enabled service. So, and you have others in the area that are solving other pieces of it or solving the problem in different ways. That's really what we're up against, and that's why like cybersecurity matters to me. It's my passionate plea to you guys to like make it matter to yourselves and bring that into your companies as well.
Yeah, and I would just add that a lot of people think that the biggest problem in cybersecurity is actually it's a technology problem. I fully disagree. It's actually a people problem, right? So you just heard Chris say that there's a critical skills gap. I think the number by 2020 is actually closer to 2 million. And that was a survey that was done by a group called ISACA earlier this year. So the skills gap is widening. The types of the increase in storage or in information that's being created, the industry is actually making up new terms about this exponential increase in information. So there's a term that was coined a few years ago called the zettabyte. It didn't exist. That's something. I Google it. It's a very large number of terabytes, and the information that is created in 2017 that just was created in 2017 is actually, I think, double the size of all traffic on the internet that was created prior to 2017. So this is it's an asymmetrical problem, right? So it's just continual. You're on one hand, the amount of data that you need to protect, the resources of organizations continues to grow, and on the other hand, a bunch of the tools that are in place to protect the controls around this from a security perspective are woefully inadequate. So Chris and Red Canary, they're approaching this problem in a very focused way in terms of augmenting resources for companies and managing the security process in an outsourced way. We're approaching this problem in a different way as well. We're taking advantage of really a new approach, a different approach for security that involves creating a memory for a network and then continuously analyzing that and arming the incident response teams, the security teams with really just taking their capabilities to the next level from an automated detection perspective and being able to utilize information that's critical to them to resolve their security incidents. So, lots of different approaches here, and we're excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it a little bit, and we'll talk about why you should care. So consequences are kind of a good place to start with that, right? There's others, but these are kind of the big four, right? Talk about business loss during an attack. Great example of that. So you all maybe saw news kind of around WannaCry and Fetch ransomware in the springtime. Big example here is the shipping company Maersk got hit really badly with this and was shut down for I don't remember how many days, a day or two, even a shorter period of time.
Yeah, I think it was a few days.
Yeah, and
so they basically shut down their entire global operation. So this shipping company is a global company. They control something like 30% of the world's logistics from a shipping perspective. So to take your business offline for that period of time, it's
$300 million, and that doesn't, as Ramon pointed out to me earlier, that doesn't include the downstream costs that their customers loss of revenue there that they'll eventually have to make them whole for. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. Your business loss. Think of it as if you're a startup, can you really afford to be offline for any period of time, right? And you're probably not going to have the processes to get yourself back up in 2 days, like Maersk might. It might take you weeks. Our company certainly went in our early days. That would have been the end of the company, right? Second, loss of company assets. So assets can be dollars, right? So a good example there, a friend of a friend, construction company, had basically all of their operating capital. You could say this was a stupid decision, but they had basically all of their operating capital in a bank account. Got simple attack, but the attacker got in there, took all the money out. It was about $700,000. And they were expecting this is an FDIC insured bank. We'll just get our money back, right? the insurance will pay that out. They did, but the bank kind of put up a fight and said, like, well, you didn't protect your credentials, you didn't protect your data enough for us to be able to insure that. So it took them about 3 years before they actually got the payout there. And as you can imagine, by then, like, the company was gone, right? There was nothing left. They paid pretty much all of the money they got back to the lawyers, and that was the end of the company. So very real there. I mean, as a startup and a tech startup, you'd also have lots of IP. If you lose your intellectual property, that can be the end of your company too. If your competitors are able to bring it to market. Reputation damage is a big one too. You know, as security companies, this is probably our biggest risk. You know, we're expected kind of to be held to a little bit higher standard than the normal company, but if we were to get hacked and our customers' data got leaked, that would probably be the end of us, depending on how that went down. And then litigation. Kind of one thing people don't realize is kind of the second order impacts, right? You know, if you think about it, if you leak some data, you're responsible for that customer data, and you start getting class action lawsuits like the nonsense going on with Equifax and stuff like that. You know, you're not going to survive that unless you have a really deep war chest, right? So that's some of the consequences.
That's both reputational damage as well as you know, CEO that no longer has a job. I'm sure he got a very nice package on the way out, but still, that's you know, not a great. It's an epic fail for that company.
Yeah, not where you want to be. So that's some of the consequences of and why you should care. And you might sit there and you might think, well, you know, we're just a startup. Like, why should we care? Like, they're not coming after us. Nobody's going to attack us. And there's a couple problems with that. So one is, you know, startups are a very soft target, right? And for a variety of reasons. One, you have money in the bank. Hopefully you've gone and raised a round, and then you go to TechCrunch or Panda or whoever, and you say, hey, you know, we raised this round and want you to publicize it so we can get the bump in the media. So, you know, we all see that, we're like, yeah, nice work. And the attackers all see it and say, hey, cool, let's go find out where all their assets are. Right?
Easy pickings.
Easy. You know, you don't like things that slow you down. When we were, you know, early on in our company, you know, you'd see me, kind of still see me this way, but like exhausted, bags under my eyes, right? Going as fast as we can to get things done. The judgment's not going to be as good in that situation, right? So are you going to be able to spot that phishing email as well as you would if you were fully operational? If you're like us, same kind of thing, like you store data all over the place, like your IT processes go down to the Apple store, take a laptop, do something to it, hand it to somebody, and maybe you never see it again. There's data there, there's data on your USB drives, we've got cloud resources all over the place now. So we've got data everywhere and questionable controls over it. And yeah, last point there, controls are either immature or non-existent, right? So you are a soft target as a startup, and there's lots of examples of startups that kind of didn't do enough and ended up just gone.
And those are just the examples from sort of the outside coming into your startup, right? There's also, you know, lots of examples of internal, you know, maybe disgruntled employees, or you know, maybe it's not a great idea to give all the developers root access to take your intellectual property and go somewhere else. I know everyone wants to move fast and you know, break a lot of glass and change the world and everything, which is great, but you may want to introduce a little bit of access control into that. And then in addition to that, you also have, you know, you're not the only target, right? So you have attackers that are targeting, you know, different applications, let's say, as part of the supply chain. So there's, in the past week, there was a big situation with something called CC Cleaner, which is a utility that is provided by a security company called Avast. And it was discovered that there are all these vulnerabilities in this cleaner. Guess what? That cleaner has been downloaded over 3 billion times. So the folks that were targeting that weren't targeting it to actually get to CC Cleaner or Avast. They were targeting it to exploit the use of this tool in large corporations where it's primarily deployed.
Yeah, great point. I mean, if you go sign a big customer, you're excited, you now became one of their biggest risks, right? So you have to know that. All right, so before we go on, any questions, thoughts, comments before we move on? This will work better if it's interactive, so let's hear it. It also helps me when I ask questions at the end. You say no. So.
There, like any of the major cloud providers that you guys are familiar with, like, how do you even know your data is secure with like Azure or AWS or, I mean, how do you know?
Yeah, so there's, so for any of the major cloud service providers, there's what's known as a shared responsibility model. So what that means in layman's terms is the cloud service provider basically takes responsibility for securing the underlying infrastructure, access to their data centers, their cloud points of presence, etc. You, as a user of those services, you're actually responsible for protecting your data and the availability of that data. So it's a, you know, that really hasn't held them back in terms of that shared responsibility model. AWS is a $16 billion behemoth and growing.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, you will never know where your data is stored exactly, right?
Oh no, you can certainly know where your data is stored in terms of if you don't take advantage of some of the functionality, some of the services that AWS offers, and you just sign up for basic capabilities where you say, I just want my data in one, what's known as an availability zone or a region that might have multiple availability zones. You can
they let you choose the data center?
They'll let you choose the availability zone. So
kind of. So this is one thing I learned. So just inside baseball, availability zone. So in like a region, Amazon has like their US East 1, US East 2. Those are different physical locations. So that's, US East 1's in Virginia, US East 2's in Ohio. There's the West data centers, all that kind of stuff. Availability zones are buildings. But if I go, so there's like US East 1, A, B, C, D. My A is not the same as your A.
Okay.
So they rotate, spread them around. Yeah. So to your question, no, you have no idea what physical building your data is.
Right. Okay.
But to Ramon's point, like you're basically giving them that part of the security. You're saying you own securing the facility.
So you could get it down to the availability zone is the bottom line. Right. And if you have a data intensive set of use cases, one popular thing to do is check to see the availability within those different availability zones. Inside baseball knowledge as well. US East 1 actually goes down at a rate 3 times the same for the same services on US West 2.
Yeah. Get out of US East 1.
Right. AWS. Yes.
Is US West 2 the one in Seattle, or is that?
It's in Oregon, outside of Oregon.
Yep. For my money, US East 2, it's the brand new one in Ohio. No natural disasters. Any other questions?
Okay. What are your opinions on business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans for the smaller businesses?
Yeah, good question. Business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans for smaller businesses. I think it really depends on what your your service level agreements and service level objectives are, right? If let's say Amazon is 3 nines across most of their services, right? And for we're okay with 3 nines for our infrastructure layer. So I think it has more to do with that. There's all kinds of return point objectives and stuff like that that you have to, as a business, decide what you're going to do and then build it out. So certainly you should have one, but it should be realistic to your capabilities and to what you can build, right? You spend lots and lots of money having multi-cloud, multi-region, everything active, but that may not be what you can do as a business, right?
Most business continuity plans, what a lot of companies just don't do right now is they don't back up their information, and it's just staggering. Like a lot of the recent high-profile attacks and breaches that we've heard about over the last month, many of them could have been severely reduced in terms of the scope with just a simple backup. But I know that I'm guilty of actually not backing up my device on a routine basis, so it's easy to kind of fall into that.
Other questions before we roll? All right, so let's talk about what cybersecurity is and a little bit more of what it isn't. So this I pulled from Wikipedia, so it's definitely accurate. ultimately, it's a good definition, right? It's the protection of information systems from theft or damage. So really, information systems, you're protecting them from people who are going to take data off of them or break them in some way. Very simple. Also, disruption or misdirection services. We'll talk about some of the specific techniques along those lines. More important, I think, for you for just to understand is like what cybersecurity isn't. This is one that's pretty common. People think like public policy or the government or the FBI or somebody like that is going to be somehow responsible for helping cybersecurity. The security of your data is not going to be something provided by the government. Period. It's not antivirus, and it's not really any technology. Ramon mentioned, the people piece of this. There's lots of security technology. If you like we did, go out and raise money in the security industry, like you're competing with 20 different product categories, and all kind of overlapping. None of those is security. You can't drop any magic box in and make your security problem go away, unfortunately. It's not 100% ever, right? The most sophisticated programs, security programs, controlled programs in the world still get attacked, right? So you can reduce your risk, you should do it, but it's never going to be perfect. You should never assume like we are free and clear, we can just operate without worrying about this. It's not compliance, which doesn't mean don't comply with the regulations that might be important to your business, but you can get perfect marks on your audits and be completely wide open and insecure. So don't depend on those. They're good frameworks, but don't depend on it to assure your security. Unfortunately, not cheap either. It's an expensive program, right? And it's expensive because there's people involved. Yeah, question?
For compliance, are you talking about like ISO standards and SOC 2 and that kind of thing? Or
Yeah, any compliance. Various industries are regulated in different ways, right? PCI compliance, if you're going to hold credit card data, things like that.
HIPAA, healthcare.
HIPAA, et cetera. SOC 2 is a perfect example, right? And this is something for you to consider as a vendor, as a consumer or customer of other services too. A SOC 2, just because someone says they have a SOC 2 type 2, that doesn't mean that it's good. What a SOC 2 report is an opinion by an auditor about the controls in that company. So if they send you the SOC 2 and nobody does this, so you guys won't either. I don't do it, but read the SOC 2s because there's actually good information in there about what their controls are, and then you can make a decision about whether that's good enough for you. But yeah, it's not a checkbox, now you're secure, you're good kind of thing.
It's also a point in time certification. So, the security threat landscape is very dynamic. So just because you received the certification 6 months ago doesn't necessarily mean that you're good. It's like Chris was saying, security is a process and needs to be continually administered.
There's also a section that you should read called user control considerations, and those are the parts that they're expecting you to do for security. If you're not reading them, you're probably not doing it.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, definitely not one size fits all, right? Your risk profiles of companies are all different. Where your data is, what types of data you have, it's all different. So be very wary of anybody who says we can give you security as kind of a black box drop-in thing. Definitely not easy. A lot of work, a lot of understanding of your environment, making sure you're positioning your company correctly. For sure. Yeah. All right. Any questions before we talk about why we have to do this? Cool. All right. So why this?
Wouldn't you have number 8 that is also active in the sense that it's always changing?
Yeah.
You can't just be like, cool, we checked that box and then move on and
it's an investment that you need to make. It's an investment in people. It's an investment in process. That you just continuously. You're never really done with it because the threat surface is never done. Right? There are always people trying to either penetrate you. You always have maybe internal gaps that need to be plugged.
Yeah, the attackers innovate really fast. Right? We have to too. All right, so why? I put this on here because I struggle with it. I'm not a long-time security guy. I've been in InfoSec for about 5 years, I guess now. But I really struggled with why. I knew what viruses were kind of nominally, but I didn't understand kind of the reason, right? Why this stuff exists. Does anybody have a guess at what reason number 1 is? Facts. Money, boom. Yeah. So there's really three reasons, right? So money's far and away the most of what we see, and what that means. Kind of to dig in on that a little bit. There's a big underground economy for your data, right? It's a black market economy. Credit card numbers. I'm not sure what the kind of most recent dollar figures are, but something like $1 to $2 per credit card number. So you hear about like a Anthem breach. I guess Anthem's a bad example. Like a Target breach where they get 80 million credit card numbers. They take those, they sell them on a market, right? As simple as that. They're trying to make money. And that's really their economics. It's a business on their side. They're just trying to do that. The next one, a little bit, depending on who you are, what you do, like you might be a target of activism, just trying to publicly discredit you through your information systems, steal your emails and use them in political campaigns, etc. And then espionage. And there's really two flavors of espionage. There's corporate espionage. Example there, had a buddy who ran a cell phone case company and went through all the Apple certification to be like an approved vendor so that he could get the designs before the phone came out, so they could have them ready for day one, because that's like a big event for those companies. And he kept seeing this competitor, like release cycle after release cycle, that he knew wasn't certified, but always had the designs. And ultimately brought in the authorities, and they looked in their network and found out that they had popped them and they were just taking the design. So he went through all the expensive hard work to get certified, and then they just came in and said, thank you very much. Right? So that's kind of corporate espionage. Lots of other examples there. We worked with a really large chemical company that they estimated that they lost 2 gigabytes of intellectual property per day that went out the door to China. And at the end of every year, they pretty much looked at, of our product lines, which ones are there exactly the same replicas, because it's literally the exact same product coming out of China, and they just shut those businesses down, right? And that's happening across kind of all of our big companies. And then the other side of espionage is obviously nation-state espionage. Kind of a whole different talk we can give on that, and really a focus in a lot of cases what Protectwise does sometimes. Question? Oh. All right. So who's doing this? Who's involved in this?
I'm sorry, you said espionage. Corporate espionage, but I thought you said one step was the other.
Two types of espionage. So corporate espionage, nation state. So yeah, it's sponsored by governments, right? All right. So who? So this is the not who slide, right? This is the kind of characterization of what you might see in the media, right? We've got the kid in the hoodie who's hitting lots of keys. And I didn't put a 400-pound hacker on here. I should have. Forgot that. And I don't, Mr. Robot's
Black Hat, which I suggest no.
Yeah, don't watch that.
Don't ever watch that movie.
Mr. Robot's a good show, though. But in reality, it's none of those things. It's really three things. It's organized crime, right? That's pure and simple. And we'll show you some examples of that. But I mentioned the underground economy. Like, that's who runs it, right? Huge economy, billions of dollars. Activist groups we've heard of, if you've paid attention to this, Anonymous or Lizard Squad, or I'm not sure who the more recent ones are. And then nation states, like we said. You can see I believe that's a picture of the Chinese cyber army there. And very, very good. They're kind of characterized by being extremely quiet, being able to persist in environments for a really long time, only detectable by really advanced tools like Protectwise that can watch that network for a really long time and look for very obscure signatures. So that's really the who of it. And just to give you guys some examples of kind of the criminal nature of this, try to stay out of the way here, but this is an example of kind of like a loss leader, right? So this guy's got a bunch of, IC, intelligence community email accounts that he's compromised, and here he's negotiating to kind of pass one along as a sample, hoping that it works, and then he can sell the rest of it to this other criminal. This is a startup, right? So this person's trying to build a DDoS service. We'll talk a little bit about DDoS in a minute, but they're like, I need help. I need like investors, right? Like the dark web angel community or something, or cooperation. So he's asking for help. He's out there fundraising, advertising, right? More dark web stuff. So this is kind of obscure, but I've got this DDoS service and you can use it and here's how you use it and here's how you pay me. And then this is my favorite. So this is like a job rec. And if you read it, like I might write a job rec just like this. Like I need C. What's that?
It says I'm not greedy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not greedy, right? But yeah, I mean, he needs somebody who can write C and Ruby and Python. Like, he's got some specific sysadmin skills that are needed. Doesn't really care about ethics at the end, but if you want to work, there's an
Experience for hacking some really secure tools and things like that.
Yeah, so I joke about it, but not unlike what I would write for a job rec for a developer, right? All right, any questions about that? About the kind of who it is? All right, cool. So next up is how. And believe it or not, there's a documented process for how to attack a company or an individual. Lockheed Martin actually was the original kind of called inventor. They described this process first. It's called the cyber kill chain. This is an expanded version of it from Dell SecureWorks that kind of goes into a little bit more detail. But it kind of starts, if you can see at the top right here, with defining the target. Then you're going to go out maybe on the dark web and find and organize your accomplices, right? Build the tools you need, figure that out, do recon, figure out how you're going to get into this environment. Research the target, research their employees, do some social engineering, figure out how to get in there, make sure you're not being detected. Deploy your exploit, get in the door, kind of wiggle your way in through whatever crack you can, kind of make sure you're okay, and then start communicating outbound back to yourself, right? And then you want to stay there for a long time, so you want to, if they find you on Chris's machine, you want to make sure you've got credentials on Ramon's machine too. So
You want to hop around.
yeah, so you need to move through the network, you need to steal more credentials, get root access, all that kind of stuff. So that's that expand access and obtain credentials, strengthen your foothold, get as many places as you can. And then ultimately, like the last, the exfiltrate data there is really what we call action on objectives. So it might be exfiltrating data, it might be just like messing with their production systems in a manufacturing plant. Depends on what the objective is for the attacker. And really, you want to stay there forever, as long as you can. So you want to cover your tracks, remain undetected. We talked about nation states, they're the best at that, at kind of staying quiet, not leaving a lot of traces. I don't know if you have any examples of that there.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of examples, but the whole point of a cyber kill chain is basically to describe what Lockheed Martin did. Is they basically took analog examples from like combat and actual war, and said, okay, from a cyber kinetic response perspective, what would an attacker do if someone were trying to intrude into your organization? What are the steps that they would actually go through? Right? So this is a very nice marketing wheel of the actual steps that would happen. But the part of the reason why this is actually very useful is in a lot of organizations you're dealing with hundreds, thousands of alerts, security alerts on a daily basis, right? So you actually don't really know how to prioritize. Well, should I? Are all these 10,000 alerts, are they all the same? Do I need to focus my efforts on all of them? So if you actually map to a cyber kill chain, you can say, okay, well, if 9,900 of my 10,000 alerts are just the basic, the first stage, the reconnaissance stage, that's interesting, and it seems like people are trying to get in the doors, but I really want to focus on the stuff that's in the later stages of the kill chain, right? Down the lateral movement, the progression across the kill chain, ultimately to that actions on objective. So it's a really great way to just kind of actually focus your efforts and focus the security effort around what's important.
Thanks. All right, so let's talk about some just common attacks and things that these people do to you. So first and kind of most obvious or most well-known would be malware, right? And there's lots of different flavors of malware, from simple things like adware and spyware, where they're just kind of trying to harvest stuff from you or serve you the right ads, all the way up to, ransomware has been a huge one in the last little while. Lots of terrible things now that can, get in your environment and spread laterally, encrypting machines as they go. Lots of different, malware patterns there. If you guys haven't seen ransomware before, this is kind of how it works. So essentially, you run software on your machine. it creates an encryption key, sends that home to the attacker, and then starts encrypting all the files on your computer so that you can't use them, deletes the originals, and then puts this on your machine and says, you need to pay me some Bitcoin, I'll give you the decryption key, and then you can get your files back, right? As Ramon mentioned, if you have good backups, this kind of doesn't affect you. So good advertisement for backups, but this is the kind of attack that shut down Maersk and lots of other companies as well. So easiest mitigation for this, back up your crap, and you don't care if they encrypt your files. It's pretty nasty. This has been a huge epidemic for the last couple of years. One other type of malware I wanted to call out, just because it's kind of the most novel, what we call living off the land, which kind of isn't even really malware. It's basically, think of all your machines, and we all, in the startup community, we like these Macs, right? Well, every Mac comes shipped with a Python environment, a Ruby environment, a Perl environment, right? Well, this is great as an attacker, right? I've got all kinds of tools on that machine that I can go in and play with. Similar story on the Windows side, like PowerShell-based attacks are huge right now. And what that means is the attacker no longer has to get you to run any of their software, which is what our traditional defenses from the endpoint standpoint are geared to look for. So antivirus is the example. It's really looking at, look at this binary that came onto this machine. Is it good or bad? Let me get some reputation information from it and stop it. Now we've got trusted IT tools like PowerShell and WMI and stuff like that are now just doing bad things, right? It's pretty terrible. It's been really hard
to do bad things.
Exactly.
Very,
yeah.
Pretty easily.
Yeah. So lots of fun there. But that's kind of the new school of attacks as it relates to malware. You can do all the same things. You just have to be a little more clever as the attacker. Any questions about malware? Cool. DDoS, if your service gets popular and then you make someone angry, someone might run like a DDoS against you. Effectively, this is a denial of service attack. The second D is for distributed. The idea is we've got all these zombie machines out in the world that we've got something on, and then we tell them all to send traffic at your website. Not a lot you can do about it. It's really something that gets mitigated more at the ISP level. But you talk about a business continuity plan, a really difficult thing to deal with, right? Because they're hitting your domains, and you're having to kind of work with your ISP to sort this out.
There's a lot of these services
There
are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then web application attacks are always fun. So this is, I don't know if this worked. Does anybody know, they had the license plate that said drop tables? I wish it worked. I don't know the story if it actually worked. But point is, this is exploiting vulnerabilities in your web application stack. It can take on a lot of different flavors. The good news on web application security is there's a lot of great resources. So OWASP.org is a really great resource for securing web applications. This is a good point to talk about Equifax that we've all been affected by in the last couple of weeks. So how did the attacker get in? Web application vulnerability in Apache Struts. And the fun part of it, the vulnerability was surfaced in March, patched in May, I think, and Equifax didn't patch it until, a couple weeks ago. So don't know exactly when the attacker got there, but they were there for a while before Equifax applied a really simple patch to shut this down. Phishing's a lot of fun. So there's some examples here of what we call business email compromise. The other big phishing news from the last year was John Podesta during the campaign. His Gmail, they said his Gmail was hacked. He got redirected to a page that looked like a Gmail login, and he put his credentials into it, and then they logged into his account. Hacking, maybe, right? He gave them the credentials. This business email compromises are also really fun. So if you notice here, the way this works is you spoof an executive in a company. So I'm going to spoof our CEO Brian, and I'm going to send him an email that says, I'm going to send some email to usually someone a couple layers down in finance that says, hey, I got to get on a plane right now, but I need you to send X dollars to so and so. Don't have time to talk about it or something like that, right? And it looks like it's from Brian. If they were diligent, they'd look into it and see that didn't actually come from his email address. But this person in finance or somewhere is wow, CEO never talks to me. I'm just going to do it. I want to be really responsive.
Ship the wire.
Just do it. And so they just ship money straight out. Again, no hacking really involved. They just send an email. And it's kind of a similar thing. Tax season every year, this happens with, you'll hear about companies who got hacked and lost all their W-2s. It's almost always this, right? Send something into somebody in HR, and they're like, hey, zip up all the W-2s and send them to me. Just send it to them. The worst one of these that I've heard of is the company that did a ton of like mergers and acquisitions. So it wasn't uncommon for the CEO to kind of just direct somebody, like ship a bunch of money to this random place. And they got hit by one of these, and it was $47 million.
No.
Poof, gone. Pretty horrible. I don't know what to do about that other than just train your users.
Yeah, I mean, the way to condition your email populace to deal with this is don't click on attachments or links. They're bad. A lot easier said than done.
I just don't read my email. It's a lot.
Just read it.
All right, and then the last one we've got here, advanced persistent threats. This is kind of a code word for nation-state style attacks. I didn't really have a good picture, so I put the like Sony hat on here, which we're not entirely sure is nation-state, but that's kind of the nature there. Again, the hallmarks of that are very, very damaging, and they're there for a long time. All right, any questions before we move on to stop being scared?
Yes.
Yeah. Use one.
Don't use LastPass though.
Why?
Well, they've been compromised a number of times, so they've actually. Sorry. I don't know. 1Password is a good one.
I use 1Pass, but our really nerdy paranoid security people use 1Pass.
I'm a paranoid security person. So.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah. Sorry. But I am. I was actually being serious. Yeah.
What other questions? Cool. All right, so let's talk about some ways that you can kind of start. So this is kind of fundamental to all of it to me, is assume that you're breached at all times. This is from Michael Hayden here. The challenge we have, and we talked about it at the start, like a dedicated attacker will always get in, right? They have unlimited time. They can keep trying things until they eventually get in. So it doesn't really do you any good to focus on making sure you're not breached all the time. Assume you're breached, right? And that helps in a couple different ways. One, you're gonna do a better job designing your IT architecture so that you assume that there's already people on every machine. Let me limit their abilities to move around and cause me more harm, right? It also focuses you on the right side of the problem, which is detecting them once they're in and shutting down disrupting the kill chain.
Responding to
response, right? Not to say prevention isn't important, it is, but you can't do a good job with prevention until you know what kind of things are going on in your environment, right? So assume you're breached at all times. I actually, like, side note, once I kind of learned this philosophy, this is what I applied to my personal stuff. So you ask about LastPass. I just assume that all my stuff is compromised all the time anyway, and I just monitor my credit, monitor my whatever, right? I don't know. That's my approach to it. Somehow it's I have more peace of mind from that than like worrying about whether they've got it all. But I was in the OPM breach, so they've got all my crap anyway. All right, and then start with some basic security controls. So really kind of a key point here is make this someone's job. Like if it's kind of a side job for everyone or for your overworked CTO or somebody like that, like it's not going to get done. Doesn't mean you have to hire a person, but just make somebody responsible for it. I had passwords on here, strong passwords, and I deleted it because I kind of think passwords are irrelevant at this point. Everything should be multi-factor authentication. Everybody know what multi-factor authentication is? Yeah, good. Use it. Anything that'll allow you to turn on two-factor authentication, turn it on. Anything that doesn't allow you to turn it on, stop using it. One of my big pet peeves is products that make you pay more for security features. So I implore you to join me in boycotting all of those products. So if they make you pay more to have two-factor, stop using it. Right? Right, Joe? Okay. All right, patching. We talked about the patchy struts thing. Similar story, like patch your machines when your phone says it needs to do security updates, when your computer says it needs to do those, do them. And across the company, make sure you have a mechanism for collecting that information and keeping it up to date. Encryption. Encryption is really important. So we're talking about the AWS model. One of the big things you can do and cloud resources to make sure any data that you're going to store there or transfer there is encrypted anytime it's in flight and encrypted when it's at rest, right? In theory, that means it's unbreakable. It's still stored on a piece of hardware that you have no idea where it is, but in theory, it's encrypted before it gets there. With quantum computing, that's all going to go out the window, but we're a few years away from that, I hope. Inventory of your assets and your data is actually subtly probably the most important one on here. I talk to companies every day who, like, our joke is that when a company tells us how many computers they have, you either divide it by 2 or multiply it by 2, because nobody has any clue how many computers their company actually has. So if you can do a good job with that, you have a little bit better idea like where your stuff is, where your data is, what you need to protect, and then you can build on that. User training, obviously really important. Phishing, like we said earlier, like there's some tools that can help there, but it's the only thing that combats that. It's really difficult when you say to somebody in, say, marketing or HR, let's say HR, and their job or recruiting is to take resumes all day, every day, and to say, don't click any links, and they're like, but my whole life is opening PDFs that people send me of their resume. Hard culture thing, you'll figure out a way to get around that. And then access control, right? So similar, we talked about AWS, same across the board. There's just a crazy number of companies in this world who have incredibly sensitive data, and everybody in the company has admin access on their box and throughout the domain. It's astonishing. One of the simplest things you can do, just not everybody needs to be an admin even on their own box, so take that away right now. Those are kind of good starting points. Any questions about any of those? Cool. And then, yeah.
What do you think about how Google disabling the SMS?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, Google disabling SMS for multi-factor authentication. They're right, but that's kind of assuming everybody lives in a world that they have smartphones or key fobs. So, not the biggest fan. I'd rather somebody have a two-factor with SMS than not have it. So it seems like kind of
the Google Authenticator utility is actually a good utility, and that's what, instead of SMS, they encourage you to use. It's another Google product, but you use that, it actually rotates the authentication codes for access, and you can preserve those for any number of period of time. Yes.
You have to stop using your flip phone.
Is there a difference between the soft keys versus the hard keys for multi-factor?
I think for a startup, as long as you're using keys, that's kind of yeah.
Hardware tokens are great. They're but fundamentally no different. It's just the same type.
Yeah, unless you're doing really sophisticated authentication using things like hardware security modules to access different network resources, it doesn't make a difference.
I know Amazon, they recommend for your administrative account, make sure you have hardware key. Your users use soft keys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a defense in depth thing, right? If you can lock that token in a safe and only pull it out twice a year, that's great.
And you had a question as well?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the problem with SMS for multi-factor authentication is.
You can exploit the is it the S7 network that SMS relies on?
Yeah, fundamentally, the payload for an SMS message is not big enough to include any kind of encryption. So it's fundamentally in clear text when it goes from the tower to.
So someone could intercept it.
Correct.
If they're in your backyard or something.
It's a man in the middle sort of problem.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean the principle of two-factor is something like a password, and something you have, right? That's a simple thing. So when you think about your authentication into any tool or any place where you have data, it should always be some combination of those two things. And whether it's a hardware token, your phone, it should always be the combination.
But if you're not that concerned about someone local attacking you, then SMS should be fine.
Yeah, in theory. I mean, I guess security people would say it's out of your control, right? You don't know if, to Ramon's point earlier about supply chain, if the cell phone tower is compromised, the person could be in India, right, or China, siphoning off stuff. It's unlikely, right? But it's just one.
If you got someone sort of sitting between you and a cell tower, they're a pretty sophisticated sort of actor. There's not a, this isn't like a commodity attack
So
that we're
they-
trying
yeah,
to
this is someone-
perpetrate.
Okay, this is someone targeting you specifically.
Correct.
Not someone like throwing a wide net out
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Other question?
Yes.
I would just also add that unless you have some protection from your carrier to do not transfer, and a good password to make sure that somebody can just log in and change that, people just steal your phone. They just say, okay, I want to transfer to your new number, and they just get that done. A few minutes, by the time you find out, they already have your number. They've used your mobile number.
Yeah,
to reset your password.
number portability was a great thing for consumers, but it was also a great thing for people that steal devices.
Other questions? Everybody's all right. Yeah, so, and then the last slide here we have getting some help, right? Like in general, unless you're starting a security company like we did, security is not your business, right? And so find people who can help you out. Know the basics, now you do, right? You've got the things on the previous chart. And I would really encourage you when you go to look for tools, services to buy to kind of augment your security to make it better, look for vendors who are going to partner with you. Protectwise does a fantastic job of that. We do that. Like all the Colorado-based security companies do that, and that's the last slide on here. We have a really active security vendor community here in Colorado, as well as security practitioner community, and so use that to your advantage, right? We have a little bit of an advantage of companies over companies in other places, so take advantage of us. Everybody's really down to earth and willing to help, and just talk security at any time. All right, last questions.
So what if you use a third-party outlet, for example, I'm using online bookkeeping, and you use QuickBooks Online, you use HubDocs. How do you partner with them? You kind of agree with your clients, because my clients are going to ask, well, so they have my information,
Right.
and they get hacked.
Yeah.
How do you address that?
Yeah, it's complicated, and it goes kind of to the shared security model that we were discussing before. But you need to make sure legally that you're covered against their breach causing you to lose your business.
Is that through insurance of any kind?
Cyber insurance is a growing field within insurance and quite popular. But I think just from a very practical perspective, if you were to implement things that we talked about a little bit earlier in the presentation, like multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication into the app, that's a great sort of starting point. And I'd also encourage you, particularly if you're dealing with customers in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, what is your travel, your third-party travel app? What is their policy around protecting and disclosing information to others? Are they basically taking your customer information and selling it to the highest bidder, or are they doing? Is it like you want to understand what their business model is and how they're protecting your information as well?
Read their SOC 2s.
Yeah. Or just their privacy policy on their website is a great place to start. Yes.
You guys talked at the beginning about the employment gap in info security, and I'm wondering if you weren't one of those people that raised your hand at the beginning, how would you get the skills and knowledge that you would need if you wanted to work in the industry?
Great question. So a couple different answers. One, SecureSet here in town is now it's like a boot camp for security. So I would definitely get in touch with them and see if that program would be right for you. But to channel the guy who runs our security operations center, what he would say is, go work at a help desk or somewhere that you do IT sysadmin work, because fundamentally, security work is really just IT and understanding the way computers and networks work, and then understanding how attackers would exploit them. So the two-pronged approach there would be, maybe you already have a job like that or have done that in the past. Then get involved with the security community. There's lots of cool meetups and stuff like that here in town, and good people who can talk you through kind of advice on how to get into the field.
Well, I'd add there's actually lots of degree programs that are out there right now. So, masters in security, or there's tons of continuing education, so Structure Set is a great local resource. There's lots of online, kind of non-classroom based resources available as well.
Check out Sands Institute, Peerless. They're two good resources.
Yeah, particularly if you have security experience. And
Or the NSA Center of Academic Excellence.
Yeah.
One of the really neat things about the security community is, I don't know, go back to my silly analogy of like the Spartans, like fighting this horrible 10-on-1 battle. That's kind of cultivated this community where it's a really tight-knit community, and they're very, very welcoming and ready to share. They want more people on their team. So definitely just get involved with them on Twitter or anywhere else.
I actually have a question that is, as employers looking to fill roles, why don't you take a more active role in not scaling up from somebody who has no security experience, but taking an active role in onboarding someone up to the level you want that might be partially good? What are you as companies doing for that part?
Yeah, so what we're doing at Protectwise is we're actually sponsoring, have relationships with a number of different technical institutes, both here locally as well as around the world, actually in Canada, other places where we are collaborating on security curriculum, and actually we have early access to top students and folks that are looking at investing in making this their career.
And we run a security operations center, and because of that, we're able to hire whoever we want. And so we fundamentally, the guy who runs our SOC hires people. We're not looking for people who've got 20 years of experience to go into that. We look for people who've got the right basis of skills and then can be trained up in security. They kind of need to be passionate about getting into security. That's our approach to it. Is not like I see it on these conversations on Twitter all the time where they're like, entry-level InfoSec job must have 6 to 8 years experience in security.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reality is it's also not very difficult to get people to come to Denver, right? This is an amazing place to live and work, right? So, people actually want to come here. So you actually get lots of really experienced people in security that they're looking to make the move here. So it's a matter of connecting with that part of the workforce as well.
How about like a public service campaign, sort of like only prevent forest fires? But it's just so frustrating to hear about somebody who like got an email that said you set your password and click on it. It just seems like as more and more people use email, social media, there should at least be a baseline of knowledge that everybody knows. Like you don't open the door to a stranger, right? You don't open your email.
We're trying really hard. Interesting statistics. So there's, like I mentioned, there's some good products that kind of help companies train their employees on phishing and stuff like that. But the results are kind of disheartening where they take like a control set and they say, at the start, they phish their own employees and see like 70% click the link or something like that, right? Or maybe it's the other way around, 30% click the link. And then they train them for a while and use their tools and give them feedback and stuff like that. And they do it again and like 5%.
You'd be really surprised like how often people click on links, right? So
background training gets into the single digits.
Yeah.
Percentage.
Yeah.
It's a really hard process.
So there's a very popular security company at their sales kickoff a few years ago. They actually, for all the attendees that were coming, there were like thousands of people coming in from around the world, and they basically said, win a trip for 2 to Hawaii for a week, all expenses paid. Click here. It was a spoofed email. Actually came from a domain that looked like the corporate email, and like 90% of people clicked on the link. They entered all their personal information, including their like personal identifiable information. And this is a security, like this is the sales team of a security company, right? So this is not an obvious, there aren't obvious solutions here.
I like the idea. Do you have like budget for this? Okay, yeah.
Or write to your congressman. That's the other alternative.
Isn't there like a modified version of Outlook where you just give no employees the ability to ever open a link?
Yeah, absolutely. You do.
That's an email. Yeah, administrator sort of privilege deal.
Yeah, that actually brings up a really interesting point.
Why don't they just do that?
So it's a really interesting point. So it goes back to the same question, like why don't we rip root access away from every machine? Culturally, mostly in business have been around for a while, it's really hard to make those changes, right? Really, really, really hard. Even when the risk is there in the face, right? Because the users just freak out. And think of it like security has been this kind of like offshoot of IT, like get over in that corner and like keep us safe, right? And it's been a really big challenge for InfoSec as like stuff has been kind of bubbling up where their CEOs now coming and saying, why are you keeping us safe? And they're like, dude, I've been asking you for money for 10 years and you just told me to go back and eat Twinkies, right? And so that's kind of the cultural shift within companies that needs to happen is hopefully we can get users, I'm just gonna say it this way and I don't mean it this way, get them scared enough that they don't hate the IT security guys and think of them as the Department of No, and really collaborate. Because it's really the only
The challenge is the business process typically gets in the way. That's why you can't. That's why a lot of organizations don't strip out attachments and non-enable links and things like that. So that's the short answer. But you guys are all starting companies, so you can just you can start anew here.
Secure by default.
When someone clicks on a link, is the risk more that there's like some sort of malware being delivered from that site as soon as they click the link, or is the risk something more like it would take them to a spoof page that would make them think they need to fill out information? Like, which one do you see more often?
It's all across the board.
Historically, the former. Historically, it would have been what we call drive-by download. You go to a page and it drops it on your machine, and you're like, oh, what is this? And you run it. It's probably moved more towards the social engineering phishing side of it. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 questions back there, gentleman in the red striped shirt.
You mentioned that security is not cheap, right? And being a low budget startup, I wonder if you guys have any experience working with something, what the pattern of they collaborating with you in. Do you have any suggestions for like companies or budget?
Yeah, trade them your service. So if you provide something, what's your company do?
Oh, it's educational web app. So.
Okay. Yeah, that might be a little hard to trade this. Well, maybe not. Like, figure out how to trade it to security vendors. We do that all the time with stuff that we use and give our service in exchange for theirs. That's not a very good suggestion. So ask for startup discounts, right? And sell it big and say, hey, we've only got 10 users right now, but we're going to be 500 employees in 3 years. Do your VC pitch on it. They'll believe you and they'll give you the startup package and drop their minimum size deal. I'm making this up. I don't know. Joe, would you do that?
It's actually a good point. Is there's lots of startup packages sort of out there as well. That's a pretty big security community as well. Yeah. So you had a question.
Are there any physical layer products?
Any what products?
Like physical layer products that you intervene before it gets to the ladder?
Physical layer.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're in a traditional environment where you've got kind of a hard network edge, you're better off than most companies today where like CEOs at Starbucks are playing on the Wi-Fi. So if you can control your business that way, definitely do it. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to cut down. There's a phrase we use called attack surface. If you think of kind of brick and mortar companies used to, their attack surface was the edge of their building where their network cables float out. So they can really stack a bunch of gear on top of that. If you can do that, do it. The reality is that most companies aren't like that anymore. There's the attack surface now encompasses like the employees' homes and Starbucks and everywhere else. So yeah, that's the other point. Like when you have an environment like that, like what happens is it's not so much like the attacker coming in and like breaking through your door. It's like your employees just open the window by clicking a link, right, or running the wrong payloads.
What's the risk of using Wi-Fi at places like Starbucks and some of the more public free Wi-Fi services that?
Don't do it. You use Yeah. So you use your personal hotspot on your device. That's what I would highly recommend. Yes.
So,
oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, what about like a Chromebook or something like that? Is that still equally as?
I'm a huge fan of Chromebooks.
No, I'm saying public Wi-Fi using a Chromebook. Are you more safe or no?
You're only more safe because the machine can do less things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
you have less privilege on the machine.
Yeah.
So yeah, essentially. Yes.
so I run an e-commerce business, and I'm going to be traveling the world for the next 6 months. So,
Yeah.
like, how do I ever connect to the internet safely?
Get a Chromebook.
Are you sure you need to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get a Chromebook and install Linux on it.
Okay.
And run secure browser.
Like wipe it every 2 days. Factory reset every 2 days.
I just want to say something. Any startups that have, that APIs are core, we're giving away some free software. So let me know if you want to talk about behavioral approach, API security. I'm happy to work with you guys, partner. So
cool.
Anything else? Other questions?
Yeah. So if you do use your personal Wi-Fi hotspot on your phone, what are the security risks there?
So you need a pretty sophisticated hacker that is going to hack the mobile voice network. Actually, not the mobile data network.
So the important thing, no matter what Wi-Fi or anything you're on, like no more HTTP, always HTTPS, because then you're at least in an encrypted communications channel. So whether if you're over the Wi-Fi at Starbucks or you're going through your phone's hotspot, just make sure you're not going to like anything that's.
Yeah, I'm not anti-Wi-Fi, but if you're going to do Wi-Fi, like use a VPN to create a secure tunnel from your device to wherever you're going.
Opera has one for free for iPhones.
Yep. OpenVPN, Opera. Yeah.
What else?
Yeah.
Do you recommend any short videos like an hour for training a small startup in some of these marketing and security?
We're recording this one. This is a good one.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, that's right. I don't know. Do you know Secure Set have some online material?
I think so. Yeah. Yep. There's definitely a bunch of content out there. I can't really speak to. There's lots of content out there. So I just kind of search around. I'm sure on YouTube you can find a whole bunch of stuff.
I would start with the SANS Institute. Yeah. It's SANS, S-A-N-S. I don't know how much free content they have, but they're an educational institute focused on security, so they may be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. And you had a question, the gentleman in green?
Yes. No. Do you have any recommendations for particular VPN vendors?
Do I have any what?
Recommendations for particular VPN vendors?
Like what kind of VPNs? Because like OpenVPN is free.
That's just a
software VPN.
Yeah.
Software VPN.
Hardware VPN vendors?
No, yeah, a vendor, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a very large space. So Cisco, Juniper. Yeah, we're not hardware guys, but Cisco, Juniper.
What's your use case? When would you use that?
Pardon?
What's your use case?
No, when you connect to Wi-Fi, you have to go through a VPN server.
So not hardware.
You have to have a provider of VPN service.
Oh, provider of VPN service.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I would just yeah.
I use all that.
But where's the server? Where's the endpoint of the VPN?
I'm not sure. We actually changed it.
Okay.
I mean, you could pay someone to set yourself up an AWS account, purchase a machine, run your VPN through that machine.
Yep.
So then you're able to see.
Maybe Opera, but mostly we don't know. Sorry.
Opera Mini. That's the client that you use, right?
What?
Opera Mini. That's the browser that you use.
So there's an Opera VPN app.
Oh, an Opera VPN app. Okay, got it. Cool.
Who else? Yeah.
So do you have any good recommendations for staying on top of like all the different things you put on your desk?
just know, oh, yesterday this became a serious security vulnerability. Like C-Clean just, oh my god,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bad day last week.
You're one of the 3 billion who downloaded it. Yeah.
and how about that version that moved the title?
Not that version. Yeah. I don't know. There's so many security blogs out there that just sort of that focus on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great answer. Like, pick software that auto updates, if you can. It's kind of ridiculous that software 27 doesn't auto update itself, but it's kind of not great advice because some doesn't.
If you don't use it,
yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, and use Cloud Ops instead. Who else? All right. So computer lock. Sorry. Security. Like, set your computer to lock every minute if you're not using it. All right. Sponsors. Thanks everybody who sponsors this event. It's a great event. Thanks everybody for coming.
And thank you to Spaces for hosting this particular session.